My name is Elena. I'm 26 years old, and the day I came home for what I thought was a family meeting, my own mother poured me a cup of coffee. Then the maid bumped into me, spilt it on purpose, leaned close, and whispered, "Don't drink it." I trusted a stranger instead of my own mom, and 5 minutes later, I found out why that coffee would have ended my life. Before I tell you what really happened, like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from, because what my family did next still haunts me every single night. I hadn't been home in 3 years. 3 long, painful years since I walked out of that house after the worst fight of my life with my mother. She said things that night that cut so deep I thought they'd never heal. Called me ungrateful, selfish, a disappointment to the family name. Said I was just like my father, weak, pathetic, better off gone. Those words echoed in my head for months, years even. They made me question everything about myself, made me wonder if maybe she was right. But then, out of nowhere, she called me. Her voice was different, softer, almost broken. She said she missed me, said the family needed to talk, that there were important things to discuss about Dad's estate, about the business, about my future. She used that word future, like I actually had one with them. Like maybe, just maybe, she wanted me back. I should have known better. I should have remembered that my mother never apologized for anything, never admitted she was wrong. But I was so desperate to believe that she'd changed, that 3 years apart had somehow made her realize what she'd lost. So I packed a bag and drove the 6 hours back to the house I grew up in, the house that held so many memories, both beautiful and terrifying. When I pulled up to that familiar driveway, my hands were shaking. The house looked exactly the same, imposing, cold, perfect from the outside, just like my mother always wanted everything to appear. She opened the door before I even knocked, and for a moment, seeing her face, I almost cried. She looked older, more fragile somehow. Her hair had more grey than I remembered, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Elena," she said, and her voice was warm, warmer than it had been in years. "You look beautiful, sweetheart. Come in, come in." That word, sweetheart. She hadn't called me that since I was a little girl. It hit me right in the chest, made me want to run into her arms like I used to when I was scared or hurt. But I held back. I'd learned to be careful with my mother's affection, because it always came with a price. She led me into the living room, the same room where we'd had our final fight 3 years ago, the same room where she told me I was dead to her. But now she was smiling, asking about my job, my apartment, my life, acting like she cared, acting like a mother should. "The others will be here soon," she said, settling into her favorite chair, the one that faced the entire room, the one that let her watch everyone and everything. "Your Uncle James, your cousin Mark, even Aunt Patricia. We have so much to discuss. About the family business, about your father's will. There are complications that need to be addressed." I felt a chill run down my spine. My father had been dead for 5 years, and his will had been settled long ago. What complications could there possibly be? But before I could ask, she stood up with that familiar smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. "Let me get you some coffee, darling. You must be exhausted from the drive." She walked to the kitchen, and I sat there in that suffocating living room, trying to push down the anxiety that was clawing at my chest. Something felt wrong. The house was too quiet, too clean, too perfect. It felt like a stage set, like everything was positioned exactly where it needed to be for some kind of performance. That's when I noticed her, the maid. She was standing in the corner, so still and quiet I'd almost missed her entirely. She was young, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. I'd never seen her before, which was strange because my mother went through household stuff like she went through expensive shoes, quickly and without much thought. Our eyes met for just a second, and something passed between us. A look of warning? Fear? I couldn't tell, but it made my stomach twist with unease. My mother returned with the coffee, served in her finest china, the set she only brought out for special occasions or important guests. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 3 years of being told I was nothing to her, suddenly I was worth the good china. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said, setting the delicate cup and saucer down on the small table beside my chair. "I made it just how you used to like it. 2 sugars, a splash of cream." The fact that she remembered how I liked my coffee should have been touching. Instead, it made my skin crawl. Why was she trying so hard? Why was every word, every gesture, every smile so carefully calculated? I reached for the cup, my hand trembling slightly. The coffee smelled perfect, rich and warm and inviting. But as I lifted it toward my lips, something crashed into me from the side. The maid had somehow tripped, or stumbled, or something. Her tray of cleaning supplies went flying, and my coffee cup shattered against the hardwood floor, sending hot liquid and porcelain fragments everywhere. "You clumsy girl," my mother shrieked, and I'd never heard such genuine fury in her voice, not even during our worst fights. "Look what you've done! That's irreplaceable china." But the maid wasn't looking at my mother. She was looking at me, her dark eyes wide with an urgency that made my blood run cold. As she knelt to clean up the mess, she moved closer to me, pretending to wipe coffee from my shoes. "Don't drink anything they give you," she whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. "Trust me. Don't drink anything." My heart stopped. Actually stopped for a moment. Why would she say that? Why would a stranger risk her job to warn me about? About what? About my own family? "I'm so sorry, miss," the maid said louder. "For my mother's benefit. I'll clean this up right away. Let me get you another cup." "No," my mother snapped, her face flushed with anger that seemed disproportionate to the accident. "Just clean up this mess and get out of here. I'll handle the coffee myself." The maid nodded and continued cleaning. But as she worked, she kept glancing at me with those same urgent eyes, like she was trying to tell me something else, something more important than just avoiding the coffee. My mind was racing. Why would my mother want to poison me? That was insane, impossible, something out of a bad movie. But then again, 3 years ago I would have said it was impossible for my own mother to tell me she wished I'd never been born. 3 years ago I would have said it was impossible for her to choose the family business over her own daughter's happiness. If you're watching this and you're starting to feel sick to your stomach, hit that subscribe button and comment where you're from, because trust me, it gets so much worse. "Don't worry about another cup," I said quickly, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm not really that thirsty anyway." My mother's eyes narrowed for just a fraction of a second before the fake warmth returned. "Nonsense, darling. You've had such a long drive. Let me make you another one." "Really, Mum, I'm fine. I insist." There was steel in her voice now, the kind I remembered from childhood when arguing wasn't an option. But I wasn't a child anymore, and something deep in my gut was screaming at me to listen to the maid's warning. "Actually," I said, standing up from my chair, "I think I need to use the bathroom first." The drive was really long. I saw something flicker across my mother's face. Frustration? Panic? But she forced another smile and nodded. "Of course, sweetheart. Take your time." I walked toward the hallway bathroom, my legs feeling like jelly. But instead of going inside, I pressed myself against the wall, just around the corner, where I could still hear what was happening in the living room. "You stupid girl," my mother hissed at the maid. "Look what you've done. Everything was perfect, and you ruined it." "I'm sorry, ma'am. It was an accident." "Was it?" My mother's voice was deadly quiet now. "Because if I find out you did that on purpose..." "Why would I do it on purpose, ma'am?" There was a long pause, and when my mother spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more calculated. "Clean this up, all of it, and then go to the kitchen and prepare another cup. Use the same pot, do you understand me? The same exact pot." "Yes, ma'am." My blood turned to ice water in my veins. The same pot. Why was that important? Unless... I heard footsteps approaching and quickly slipped into the bathroom, my heart hammering so loud I was sure the whole house could hear it. I locked the door and leaned against it, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. The maid had warned me not to drink anything. My mother was insisting I have coffee from a specific pot. And the way she'd said, the same exact pot, like it was crucial, like whatever was in that pot needed to get into my system. I thought about calling someone, but who? The police? And tell them that my mother was acting suspicious about coffee. They'd think I was crazy. My phone had no signal anyway, it never did in this house. Something about the way it was built. All that old stone and metal. I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked pale, scared, young. I looked like the frightened little girl who used to hide in this same bathroom when my parents fought, when my mother's temper exploded, when the house felt too dangerous to be anywhere else. But I wasn't a little girl anymore. And if my mother was planning something horrible, I needed to be smart about it. I flushed the toilet and ran the water, trying to buy myself time to think. Then I opened the door and walked back toward the living room, every step feeling like I was walking toward my own execution. The coffee mess was gone. The maid was nowhere to be seen, and my mother was sitting in her chair again, holding a fresh cup of coffee and wearing that same cold smile. "Here you go, darling," she said, offering me the cup. "Fresh and hot, just the way you like it." I took the cup with hands that were definitely shaking now, hoping she couldn't see how terrified I was. The coffee looked normal, smelled normal, but the maid's words were echoing in my head. Don't drink anything they give you. Thank you, I said, holding the cup, but not lifting it to my lips. Aren't you going to drink it? My mother asked, and there was something sharp in her voice now. Of course, I said, but I still didn't drink. Instead, I pretended to blow on it to cool it down, stalling for time. That's when I heard a car in the driveway. Then another. The rest of the family was arriving for this mysterious meeting about my father's will. Ah, my mother said, standing up. That must be your Uncle James. Elena, drink your coffee quickly, before they come in. I want to talk to you privately for just another minute. The urgency in her voice made my skin crawl. She wanted me to drink it before the others arrived. Before there were witnesses to... what? I lifted the cup toward my lips, watching my mother's face. Her eyes were locked on me, intense and hungry, like she was waiting for something specific to happen. I missed this, I lied, bringing the cup closer to my mouth. I missed having coffee with you, Mum. Her smile widened, and for the first time, it looked genuine, genuinely evil. That's when the front door burst open, and my Uncle James walked in, followed by my cousin Mark and Aunt Patricia. They were talking loudly, laughing about something, filling the house with noise and chaos. Elena, Uncle James boomed when he saw me. Look at you, kiddo. Come here, and give your old uncle a hug. I set down the coffee cup carefully, casually, and stood up to greet them. My mother's face went through about 6 different emotions in 2 seconds. Frustration, anger, disappointment, then back to that fake maternal warmth. James, she said tightly. You're early. Traffic was better than expected, he said, squeezing me in a bear hug that actually felt genuine. God, Elena, we've missed you. This family hasn't been the same without you. I felt tears threatening to spill over. Uncle James had always been kind to me, had always treated me like I mattered. Even during the worst of my fights with my mother, he tried to play peacemaker. I've missed you too, I whispered against his shoulder. Well, my mother said, her voice cutting through the moment like a knife. Now that everyone's here, why don't we all sit down? Elena was just having some coffee. She gestured toward the cup I'd abandoned on the side table, and I saw Uncle James glance at it with a puzzled expression. Since when do you drink coffee, kiddo? He asked. I thought you hated the stuff. My blood turned to ice. He was right. I'd always hated coffee, the taste, the smell, everything about it. My mother knew that. She'd known it my entire life. So why had she made such a point of giving me coffee? Why had she insisted I drink it? Unless it wasn't about the coffee at all. Unless the coffee was just a delivery method for something else. People change, James, my mother said smoothly. Elena's acquired more sophisticated tastes over the years. But I was looking at that coffee cup like it was a snake coiled to strike. Why would my mother give me something she knew I hated? Why would she be so insistent that I drink it? Why would she care what pot it came from? The maid's warning echoed in my head again. Don't drink anything they give you. Actually, I said, my voice coming out stronger than I felt. Uncle James is right. I still don't really like coffee. I was just being polite. My mother's smile faltered for just a second. Nonsense, darling. You were drinking it just fine before they arrived. Was I? I looked directly at her, letting her see that I was starting to understand something. I don't remember actually drinking any of it. The room got very quiet, very quickly. Uncle James was looking back and forth between my mother and me, like he was watching a tennis match. Cousin Mark had stopped scrolling on his phone. Aunt Patricia had paused in the middle of taking off her coat. Well, my mother said, that dangerous edge creeping into her voice. If you don't want the coffee, Elena, that's fine. But we should start this meeting. We have important things to discuss. That's when my cousin Mark spoke up. Actually, Aunt Helen, I could use some caffeine. Mind if I finish Elena's coffee? Hate to see it go to waste. Before anyone could stop him, he reached for my abandoned cup and took a long drink. My mother went white. Actually white. Like all the blood had drained from her face. Mark, no, she started to say, but it was too late. He'd already swallowed. Not bad, he said, smacking his lips. Little bitter, but not bad. We all stared at him for a moment. Nothing happened. He looked fine, normal, completely unaffected. But then, maybe 30 seconds later, his face changed. I feel, he started to say, then stopped. His hand went to his throat. I feel weird. Mark? Aunt Patricia stepped toward him. What's wrong? My throat feels... His voice was getting hoarse now. Feels like it's burning. And then he collapsed. Just dropped to the floor, like someone had cut his strings. 1 second he was standing there talking. And the next second he was on the ground, convulsing. Foam coming from his mouth, his eyes rolling back in his head. The room exploded into chaos. Uncle James dropped to his knees beside Mark, shouting his name. Aunt Patricia was screaming. Someone was calling 911. I think it was me, but I honestly don't remember. And through all of it, I was watching my mother. She wasn't panicking like the rest of us. She wasn't crying or screaming or trying to help. She was just standing there, staring at Mark's convulsing body with an expression I'd never seen before. Relief. She looked relieved. And that's when I knew with absolute, crystal clear certainty that the maid had saved my life. Because that coffee, the coffee my mother had insisted I drink, the coffee she'd made from a specific pot, the coffee she'd been so desperate for me to finish before my family arrived, that coffee had been meant for me. If you're still with me, and your heart is racing as much as mine was in that moment, please subscribe and let me know in the comments what you would have done. Because what happened next changed everything. The paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late. Mark was gone by the time they got him to the hospital. 24 years old, healthy as a horse, no medical problems, and he died from what the doctors said was acute poisoning from some kind of plant-based toxin, something called aconitine, derived from a flower called monkshood. During the chaos at the hospital, while Aunt Patricia was crying and Uncle James was talking to the police, I pulled out my phone and did some research. Monkshood, I learned, was also called wolfsbane. It was beautiful, deadly, and historically used for exactly one purpose: murder. The symptoms matched exactly what I'd watched Mark go through. Burning sensation in the mouth and throat, difficulty breathing, cardiac arrhythmia, convulsions, death, and the most terrifying part, it was nearly undetectable in an autopsy unless you specifically tested for it, which meant my mother hadn't just decided to poison me on a whim. This was planned, researched, premeditated. The police questioned all of us. Of course, standard procedure when someone dies, suddenly and unexpectedly. They asked about Mark's health, his habits, what he'd eaten or drunk. My mother played the role of devastated aunt perfectly, tears at all the right moments, shock and grief and confusion. But I watched her during those interviews, and I saw something else. I saw calculation. I saw someone who was disappointed that the wrong person had died. When they asked me about the coffee, I told them the truth. That my mother had given it to me, that I hadn't wanted to drink it, that Mark had finished it instead. But I didn't mention the maid's warning. Not yet. Something told me to keep that information to myself until I understood more about what was happening. The family meeting was postponed indefinitely, obviously. Everyone went home except me. I couldn't bear the thought of staying in that house, but I also couldn't bear the thought of driving 6 hours while my hands were still shaking and my mind was reeling. My mother offered to let me stay in my old room, and the fake concern in her voice made me want to vomit. Instead, I checked into a hotel about 20 minutes away and tried to process what had just happened. My mother had tried to kill me. My own mother had invited me home, welcomed me with warmth and love and coffee, and then tried to murder me with plant poison. The woman who gave birth to me, who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and held me when I had nightmares, that same woman had looked me in the eye and served me a cup of death. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's face as the poison took hold. I saw my mother's expression of relief when she realized he was dying instead of me. I heard the maid's whispered warning over and over again. Don't drink anything they give you. The next morning, I drove back to the house. I told my mother I'd forgotten something in my old room, but really, I needed to talk to that maid. I needed to understand how she'd known, why she'd risked everything to warn me. I found her in the kitchen, washing dishes with the kind of focused intensity that told me she was trying not to think about something horrible. "Excuse me," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned around, and when she saw me, her face went through the same range of emotions my mother's had the day before. Surprise, fear, then something that might have been relief. "Miss Elena," she said, "I heard about your cousin. I'm so sorry. What's your name?" I asked. "Maria. Maria, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. How did you know about the coffee?" She glanced around nervously, making sure we were alone. Then she set down the dish she'd been washing and really looked at me for the first time. "I've been working for your mother for 8 months, she said quietly. This isn't the first time she's had a family meeting like this. Oh, my blood went cold. What do you mean? Last year, your cousin David came to visit. He was having money troubles, kept asking your mother for loans. She invited him for dinner, served him wine. Maria's voice was barely above a whisper now. He got sick, really sick, had to be hospitalized. I remembered that. David had been sick for weeks, with what the doctors said was some kind of food poisoning or stomach bug. But he'd recovered, so no one thought much of it. And before that, Maria continued, your Aunt Ruth, the one who was contesting your father's will. She came for lunch, ate the soup your mother made specially for her. She was sick for months afterward, kept getting weaker and weaker, until she died. I finished. Aunt Ruth had died 6 months ago, from what the doctors called organ failure. She'd been sick for so long that everyone just accepted it as one of those tragic things that happen as people get older. But now, why didn't you say anything? I asked. Why didn't you go to the police? Maria laughed bitterly. And tell them what? That I, an immigrant maid with no documentation, think my employer is slowly poisoning her family members? Who would believe me? Who would even listen? She was right, and I knew it. The police would have dismissed her immediately, and my mother would have destroyed her life for even suggesting such a thing. But yesterday was different, Maria continued. Yesterday, I heard her on the phone with someone, talking about making sure the dose was strong enough this time. She said she was tired of waiting, tired of people surviving, when they should just die. Maria's hands were shaking now as she spoke, and then I saw her, in the kitchen, grinding up those flowers, those purple flowers she grows in her private garden, the ones she told me never to touch, never to even go near. I watched her stir the powder into the coffee pot, and I knew that whoever drank from that pot wasn't going to survive this time. Purple flowers, monkshood, wolfsbane. The pieces were all clicking into place, with a clarity that made me sick to my stomach. She's been killing people, I whispered. For how long? I don't know, Maria said. But I think anyone who threatens her control over the family money ends up getting sick, or dead. That's when it all made sense. My father's will had left everything to my mother, with provisions for the family business to be managed by a board that included me, Uncle James, and several cousins. If enough of us died or became incapacitated, my mother would have complete control over millions of dollars. David had been asking for money. Aunt Ruth had been contesting the will. Mark had been talking about wanting more involvement in the family business. And me? I was the biggest threat of all, because my father had specifically named me as his successor if anything happened to my mother. She wasn't just trying to kill me out of hatred or revenge for our fight 3 years ago. She was trying to kill me for money. Why did you save me? I asked Maria. You could have just kept quiet, kept your job, stayed out of it. She looked at me with eyes that held more sadness than anyone should have to carry. Because I have a daughter, she said simply. She's about your age, and she lives in Mexico with my sister. I haven't seen her in 2 years, because I've been working here, sending money home, trying to save enough to bring her to this country. Maria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. When I saw your mother preparing that poison, when I realized she was going to murder her own child for money, I thought about my daughter. I thought about how I would want someone to save her if she was in danger, even if it cost them everything. I started crying then, actually sobbing, right there in my mother's kitchen, because this stranger, this woman who had every reason to stay silent and protect herself, had risked everything to save my life. She'd risked her job, her safety, her ability to provide for her own child, just to whisper a warning to someone she barely knew. Thank you, I said through my tears. Thank you for saving my life. What are you going to do now? She asked. That was the question, wasn't it? What do you do when you discover your own mother is a serial killer? How do you process the fact that the woman who gave you life has been systematically taking life from everyone else in your family? I could go to the police, but would they believe me? My mother was a pillar of the community, a respected widow, a grieving aunt who'd just lost her nephew to a tragic accident. I was the estranged daughter who'd been out of the family for 3 years, who'd had public fights with my mother, who might just be trying to cause trouble. But then I remembered something. Maria had said she heard my mother on the phone, talking to someone about making sure the dose was strong enough this time. That meant there was someone else involved, someone helping her, someone who knew about the murders. Maria, I said, the phone call you overheard, do you remember anything else about it? Did you hear a name? Or... She called someone Dr. Prescott, Maria said. She was talking about increasing the concentration, about making sure there wouldn't be any survivors this time. Dr. Prescott. I knew that name. He'd been the family doctor for years, had treated my father during his final illness. He'd also been the one to sign Aunt Ruth's death certificate, listing organ failure as the cause of death. My mother had an accomplice, someone with medical knowledge, someone who could help her avoid autopsies or investigations, someone who could make murders look like natural deaths. I spent the next 3 days planning. Not planning revenge, planning justice. Because there's a difference. And that difference matters when you're trying to stop a killer. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. I took pictures of my mother's garden, specifically the monkshood plants that Maria had described. I recorded conversations with family members about David's illness and Ruth's death, asking innocent questions about their symptoms and medical treatment. I researched Dr. Prescott and discovered he'd been involved in signing death certificates for an unusually high number of my mother's relatives and family friends over the past 5 years. Most importantly, I convinced Maria to make a statement. Not to the police, not yet, but to a private investigator I hired with money from my own savings. Someone who could gather evidence properly, who could build a case that would actually hold up in court. The private investigator was a former police detective named Sarah Chen, and when I told her my story, she didn't dismiss me or act like I was crazy. She listened, took notes, and then said something that changed everything. You're not the first person who's contacted me about suspicious deaths in wealthy families. There's been a pattern we've been tracking. Family members dying of mysterious illnesses, wills being changed right before deaths, doctors who seem to have unusually high mortality rates among their patients. It turned out that my mother and Dr. Prescott were part of something bigger, a network of people who specialized in making inconvenient family members disappear, all for the right price. They'd been operating for years, probably decades, helping wealthy families solve inheritance problems. Sarah worked quickly and quietly. She had contacts in the medical examiner's office who could run toxicology tests on tissue samples from Ruth's body. She had connections in the police department who could request a review of David's hospitalization records. She had forensic specialists who could test the soil and plants in my mother's garden. Within 2 weeks, we had enough evidence to bury them both. But I didn't want my mother to just disappear into the justice system. I didn't want her to hire expensive lawyers and drag things out for years while she continued to walk free. I wanted her to know that I knew. I wanted her to look me in the eye and realize that her own daughter, the daughter she'd tried to murder, was the one who brought her down. So I went back to the house one more time. I found my mother in her study, sitting at my father's old desk, going through what looked like financial documents, family trust, paperwork, will modifications, insurance policies, planning her next move, probably. "Hello, Mother," I said from the doorway. She looked up, and for just a second, her mask slipped. I saw surprise, then fear, then calculation, as she tried to figure out what I was doing there. "Elena," she said, forcing that fake warmth back into her voice. "What a lovely surprise. I wasn't expecting you. I wanted to talk to you about Mark," I said, walking into the room and closing the door behind me. "Oh, sweetheart, I know how hard this must be for you. Losing him so suddenly, so tragically. Cut the act," I said quietly. She blinked. "I'm sorry?" I said, "Cut the act. I know what you did." The transformation was immediate and terrifying. The fake maternal warmth disappeared completely, replaced by something cold and reptilian. This was the real woman who'd raised me, calculating, ruthless, capable of anything. "I don't know what you think you know. I know about the monkshood in your garden. I know about Dr. Prescott. I know about David and Ruth, and probably half a dozen other family members who got in your way over the years." She stood up slowly, her hand moving toward the letter opener on the desk. But I was ready for that. "I know about the coffee," I said. "I know it was meant for me. I know Mark died because he drank what was supposed to kill me." "You can't prove anything," she said, but her voice was different now, desperate. "Actually, I can. Tissue samples from Ruth's body tested positive for aconitine. David's medical records show symptoms consistent with low-level poisoning over several weeks. The soil around your monkshood plants has been analyzed. Dr. Prescott's records are being reviewed by the state medical board as we speak." I pulled out my phone and showed her a recording app that was running. "And now, I have you on tape, not denying any of it." She lunged for the letter opener then. But I was faster. I was younger, and I was ready for her violence, in a way I'd never been as a child. "The police are already on their way," I said, holding her wrist as she struggled. "Sarah Chen, do you remember her? She's the detective who investigated that string of suspicious deaths in the Morrison family 2 years ago. Turned out their stepmother was doing exactly what you've been doing. Sarah's very good at her job." I could hear sirens in the distance now, getting closer. "You're my daughter," my mother hissed, and the hatred in her voice was more honest than anything else she'd said to me in years. "I gave you life, and then you tried to take it away," I said. "For money, for control, for a bigger piece of an inheritance that was never even supposed to be yours." The sirens were in the driveway now. "You know what the saddest part is?" I continued. "If you'd just been a decent mother, if you'd just loved me the way you were supposed to, I would have given you anything you wanted. I would have signed over every penny of my inheritance, every bit of control over the family business. All you had to do was not try to murder me." The police came through the front door then, with Sarah Chen right behind them. They had a warrant for my mother's arrest, and another one for Dr. Prescott, who was being picked up at his office at the same moment. As they read my mother her rights, she looked at me with pure venom in her eyes. "You'll regret this," she said. "Family is everything, and you just destroyed yours." "No," I said. "You destroyed it. Years ago. I'm just making sure you can't destroy anyone else." They took her away in handcuffs, and I watched from the front window as the police car disappeared down the long driveway. The house felt different, already less oppressive, less suffocating, like a weight had been lifted from its very foundation. Maria appeared beside me, and we stood together in silence for a moment. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I'm going to sell this house," I said. "I'm going to make sure you and your daughter are both taken care of for the rest of your lives. And I'm going to try to figure out how to live with the fact that my own mother tried to kill me." "The first two sound like good plans," Maria said softly. "The third, that will take time." She was right. It's been 6 months now since the arrest, and I'm still in therapy trying to process everything that happened. My mother pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. Apparently there were more victims than we'd initially discovered, going back almost 10 years. Dr. Prescott turned state's evidence and testified against her in exchange for a lighter sentence. Uncle James and the other surviving family members have been incredibly supportive. They've helped me understand that the woman who raised me wasn't really my mother, not in any way that mattered. She was a predator who happened to share my DNA. The family business has been restructured, with safeguards to prevent this kind of concentrated power from ever existing again. David survived his poisoning and has made a full recovery. We've created a foundation in Mark's name to help other families who've been affected by familial violence. But if I'm being completely honest, the thing that saved me wasn't just Maria's warning. It was the fact that I'd learned, over my years away from that toxic house, to trust my instincts. When something felt wrong, it was wrong. When someone's behavior didn't match their words, I paid attention to the behavior. My mother spent years teaching me not to trust myself, not to believe my own perceptions, not to think I was smart enough or strong enough to see through her manipulations. But 3 years of distance had given me back my ability to recognize danger, even when it was wearing a familiar face. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, if you have family members who make you feel crazy, who gaslight you, who make you question your own reality, please trust your instincts. Please get away from them if you can. Please don't let them convince you that blood relation means you owe them access to your life, your trust, or your safety. And if you're in immediate danger, if someone in your family is threatening you or hurting you, please reach out for help. Call the domestic violence hotline, talk to a therapist, contact the police. Don't try to handle it alone the way I did, because I got lucky. I had Maria to warn me, and I had resources to investigate. Not everyone has those advantages. The last thing I want to say is about forgiveness. People keep asking me if I forgive my mother, if I'll visit her in prison, if I think she can change, and the answer is no. I don't forgive someone who planned my murder. I don't think she can change, and I won't waste another second of my life trying to maintain a relationship with someone who saw me as an obstacle to overcome rather than a daughter to love. That doesn't make me a bad person. It makes me a smart person who learned the difference between family and blood relation. Family are the people who would risk everything to save you, like Maria did. Blood relations are just people who happen to share your genes, and sometimes those people are the most dangerous of all. If this story resonated with you, please share it. Please subscribe and comment with your own experiences, or just to let me know where you're watching from. Because there are so many of us out there, people who've survived family trauma, people who've had to choose between their safety and their blood relatives, people who've learned the hard way that not everyone who claims to love you actually has your best interests at heart. My name is Elena. I'm 26 years old, and I survived because a stranger cared more about my life than my own mother did. That's a horrible truth to live with. But it's also a powerful reminder of how much good there is in the world, sometimes in the most unexpected places, from the most unexpected people. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for believing me. And thank you for subscribing and staying with me through this nightmare. Your support means more than you'll ever know, especially as I continue to heal from the knowledge that the woman who was supposed to protect me spent years planning my death. Trust your instincts. Protect yourself. And remember that you deserve to be loved by people who would never, ever hurt you, no matter who they are, no matter how they're related to you, and no matter what they've convinced you that you owe them. The coffee was meant to kill me, but instead, it taught me the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones you need to fear the most. And sometimes, a stranger's kindness is the only thing standing between you and death. Don't let anyone convince you that family loyalty means accepting abuse. Don't let anyone tell you that blood is thicker than water. And if someone offers you coffee and your gut tells you not to drink it, listen to your gut. It might just save your life. Subscribe, comment where you're from, and take care of yourselves. We're all just trying to survive in a world where the people who should protect us don't always do the job. But we can protect each other. We can warn each other. We can choose to be like Maria instead of like my mother. And that makes all the difference.